I'm Beth, and these are my memories. To the complex and precious people who appear in them, thank you. I forgive you, and I'm sorry. You shaped me, and I carry you still. In remembering, I've come to see us all more clearly, not as villains or saints, but as humans doing the best we knew how. I must have forgotten, until now. It was only 2 summers, but there were no better summers. A few years earlier, I had spent several weeks at United Methodist Church camp, and those were a lot of fun, canoeing, eating flaming marshmallows, and listening to youth pastors pray in the woods. I could do without the last part, but I was all about the first two. After Dad moved into the house on Yulin Lane, he started taking us on family outings. He and I used to go into the woods, and he taught me to shoot beer cans with his rifle. He would set up cans filled with water, and when I hit one, it didn't fall off the log, it exploded. It was thrilling and fun, and I was a very good shot. Dad wasn't a hunter except for the mushroom hunts he used to take us on when we were little, and we never hurt anything except the peace and quiet. He also took us camping. Judith hated camping, but I loved it. From Dad, I learned to love the outdoors. He would drive us out into the country and park in a dirt clearing next to a cornfield. I loved carrying all our gear down the path and across Wildcat Creek and up the hill to a little bluff that overlooked the creek. I loved setting up our campsite. We brought a tent and our sleeping bags, a cooler full of hot dogs and buns and marshmallows, and beer for Dad. I collected wood for the campfire. We cut sticks off of saplings, and Dad whittled them down into roasting implements. We always set our marshmallows on fire, blew out the torch, and ate the crunchy burnt husk. Judith, Tommy, and I slept in the tent while Dad slept outside under the stars. Well, under trees that obstructed the stars, but he stayed next to the fire all night. I loved the idea of sleeping outside, but my fear of waking up with a bug in my sleeping bag or my mouth outweighed my desire to try it. One night I awoke to the call of nature. I quietly unzipped the tent, not wanting to wake anyone, and stepped out. After I came back from the woods where I had done my business, I crouched down next to the fire to poke at it a little bit. I could never sit next to a fire without messing with it. I still can't, to be fair. Dad later told this story by saying that he heard a fish splash in the creek. At the sound, my eyes got huge. I leapt up, turned, and dove directly into the tent without touching the ground. He had only been pretending to sleep. His telling of this night sent him into laughter so hard he struggled to breathe. He still laughs about it to this day. After a year or so, Janice started bringing my best friend from East Tip Heights, Maggie, and her brother Miles to hang out with us on Yulin Lane. We were seeing a lot of them, and Dad and Janice became very close. So much so that they fell in love. Maggie and Miles would come and do things with Judith and Tommy and me, and sometimes we would take big group outings. One time we went inner tubing in big black tractor tubes that Dad borrowed from someone he worked with at Perilous Wire. I don't know if it was down the Wabash River or somewhere else, but they parked one car upstream and one car downstream. We took coolers and snacks, climbed in our inner tubes, and off we bobbed. It was a fun day, although the water was high and the banks were littered with fallen trees. When the water level was normal, you could slip by underneath a lot of these deadfalls, but when the water was high, they became obstructions. Mostly I tried to stay away from these spiky obstacles because I knew they were full of spiders. You could see the enormous webs as you floated past.
Oh, yuck! They're everywhere.
At one point, as we came around a bend, the current pushed me into one of these fallen trees. The water was moving so fast that it forced most of me underneath the branches, and I went under and somehow flipped and ended up underneath my tube. I was fully submerged and swallowed several gulps of that nasty river water. I could see little snaily-looking things that were in the water I was swallowing, and I was more worried about that than I was the possibility of drowning. Time really does slow down when you're in mortal danger. That I had those thoughts while struggling to get my head above water again is breathtakingly bizarre. I probably wasn't underwater for more than a few seconds when my dad grabbed my arm and my tube and pulled me out from under the tree. I was free! I was alive, shaken up but breathing. I've coughed out some of that greenish snail water. My mishap managed to put a damper on the rest of the trip, with everyone realizing this could be more dangerous than we had at first considered. But we were near the end by then, and we made it unscathed out of our floating donuts and back into Dad's old white station wagon. We drove Janice back to her bicentennial Chevy Nova and headed back home where Mom was waiting for us. She came straight up to me and asked me what had happened.
I've been a nervous wreck. What happened to you?
I glossed over the details and just said
I got stuck under a tree.
she hugged me and said she knew something had happened. She had felt I was in danger, and she had envisioned me under the water spinning around in circles. Mom always had a sixth sense about some things, but this time must have been awful. I can't imagine being alone and feeling that cold dread, sensing something was wrong and not being able to do anything about it, not even knowing exactly where we were. Somehow, over the years, she always suspected when I was underwater, even when I tried not to let it show. We didn't go inner tubing again, though we spent many other weekends with Janice, Maggie, and Miles. But that day I had learned that I was mortal,
You know what? That could have been way worse.
that while childhood might feel carefree, I couldn't completely let my guard down. The river had shown its teeth, and Mom had felt it from miles away. That summer held joy, yes, but also the first real glimpse of danger, of intuition, of how fragile we all were. And still the summers kept coming. For little horse-loving Beth, the two best vacations were at my cousin Mandy's family's farm in Michigan. My dad's Aunt Louise lived in South Haven, a beach town on Lake Michigan. The first trip north was primarily to take my Grandma Irene to see her sister. They would take us into bars to eat lunch, and Dad would give us quarters to play pinball. We would go to the beach. Judith couldn't get enough of beach life. But when I discovered that one of Aunt Louise's daughters lived out of town with a farm and horses, I was sold. I liked beaches just fine, but I loved horses. The first night I was in bed in Aunt Louise's back bedroom when I heard a male voice that wasn't my dad talking in the living room. I crept over to the door to see who it was, and I heard the adults telling this man, apparently a grandson of Aunt Louise, that it was too bad I wasn't awake. They thought I should go out to his parents' farm because I had been interested in the horses. This cousin, who said he spent the day dooney bopping in his Jeep Wrangler, told Dad they should bring me out to the farm the next day to stay with his sister Mandy. Horses? Dooney bopping? I wanted to be part of this conversation, but I was too shy to just strut out into the living room and insert myself. So I did the only logical thing. I climbed back into bed and very noisily pretended to fall out of the bed, knowing that if I did it correctly, that would bring my grandma running. And I was right. As soon as I fell on the floor like a big lump of clunky laundry, Grandma appeared in the door and asked what was happening in there.
Ichabod, did you fall out of the bed?
She told me to come out and meet my second cousin Luke. The following day, we got into Dad's white station wagon and headed for the farm. I was the only one taking a suitcase because I was getting dropped off. At first, I was a little nervous meeting my cousin Mandy, who was about my age. She was warm and friendly, excited to have company, and we headed out for a tour of the farm before my dad even left for the trip back to South Haven.
Come on, I'll show you how we feed the cows.
We hit it off right away, laughing as I held on behind her and Lady Sunset carried us through pastures and woods. I was in heaven, but only earthly heaven. The first night when it was bedtime, she pulled out a Bible, read a passage, and asked which verses I liked to read.
Ah.
I didn't know any verses. We hadn't gone to church since Fowler. I felt a little bit put on the spot, but Mandy just set the Bible aside. There were two horses we rode. Pat, a black round-bellied old gelding, and Lady Sunset, a gorgeous chestnut-colored mare. The second summer I was there, Sunset had produced a foal. I've forgotten the foal's name. It might have been Sunrise. Pat, being older and less spicy than Sunset, was generally my ride during the day. We didn't saddle them. We rode bareback all over the farm. I was not an experienced rider, so I was very sore from trying to keep from falling off. I'm sure I did fall off the first few times I climbed up,
Ow!
standing on a raised well cover to get my leg over. The insides of my thighs were completely covered with black horsehair from his back. We gradually went from slow walking, for my sake, to faster travel, which I don't think can really be called trotting. Without stirrups, an inexperienced rider can't move with the horse. All I could do was grab his mane and hope for the best. I really preferred to just meander since, after all, I had a will to live. It seemed very hot, and the farm had an irrigation pond. We rode into the pond. Surprisingly, the horses seemed to like this, and as Mandy and Sunset rode in first, big brown turds floated up to the surface that then Pat and I dodged past as we followed along.
Ew, thanks a lot, Sunset.
But we just laughed. I was already covered with horse. What was a little horse poop now? Mandy's sister took us to a drive-in restaurant to get lunch on one of my visits. I'm astounded that she let us filthy beasts into her car, but she did.
You guys are gonna have to stay in the back.
Drive-thrus for cars weren't as big in the 1970s as now. At the time, for drive-up service, it was more common to go to a bay, park, speak the order into an intercom, and then the order was brought out to the car on a tray or in bags. I don't remember what I had ordered, but it didn't come with French fries. Instead, I got onion rings. Not the little crunchy kind with unrecognizable onions. These were the kind that glorify onions for people who love onions. I did not love onions. I did love fried breading, so I pulled the slimy ring of onion out of the ring of fried breading and tried to hand it to Mandy. I don't know if I thought she would eat it or throw it out the window. There wasn't a lot of planning involved in my part of this crime. But Mandy wrinkled her face in disgust, slapped my hand from the bottom, and the slimy, squishy onion went flying. Across the back seat it sailed and stuck itself to the window on the passenger side door. It was near the top, and any attempt to retrieve the evidence would alert Mandy's sister to its existence and our complicity in its placement in her automobile, and we would both be in trouble.
Oops.
Shh. When we got back to the house, her sister parked, flipped forward the driver's seat to let us out, and we exited the car, leaving the onion and our guilt sealed inside. I don't remember whether my family came to get me or if my cousins drove me back to Aunt Louise's house in South Haven. But I had found a family member that was a lot like me, who laughed at the same things I did, who was about the same age, and we both had that love of horses, even if my bareback riding was still pretty shoddy. But these had been the two happiest of summers. For a long time I didn't get to see Mandy again after that second summer because we left Indiana and moved to Parma, Ohio later on. She did come to visit me one time in Parma, but that's a story for a later day. We fell out of touch, another in a long line of fragmented connections that I was ill-equipped to maintain. It was only 2 summers, 2 echoes, camping and pinball, horsehair and laughter, mischief and mortality, woods, and a farm in Michigan. This is how memory captivates us, through summers that shimmer, kinships that flicker, through the echoes of small moments that never leave us. Thank you for listening. These are my memories, and maybe they echo yours too. I must have forgotten, but I remember now. If this episode stirred something in you, please consider sharing it, subscribing, or leaving a review. Sound design for this episode includes excerpts from MuseHub and Pixabay. These audio textures help carry the memory, shape the emotional arc, and are honored with gratitude here.